go.
Hello, folks. Sorry for the
Welcome.
slight delay. Welcome, welcome.
Welcome, everyone. We're so happy we're here. We're going to try this again. Yeah, although you can't see each other, the chat is open. Feel free to introduce yourselves. Let us know where you're calling in from. Let everyone know what your tech specialty is. Drop your LinkedIn, whatever you feel comfortable with. Extra points if you want to share what you're drinking or what your webinar kickoff call snack is. We shared ours earlier. Mine is my green smoothie. Mark, you want to introduce yourself and share your
Yeah.
snack or
Hey,
drink?
folks. Excited to be here. Mark Owner from Technologists for the Public Good. Excited to work with USDR to host this. I've got some black tea here and really excited to have you all join us and be a part of this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So, few rules for the road. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A portal. The chat is open for context, it's for chatting, it's for sharing with each other, but we will be pulling the questions towards the end of the call from the Q&A portal. So feel free to upvote any questions that you see and you say, oh, I also have that same question. Again, we'll be pulling those questions towards the end of the call from the Q&A portal. So we don't want to miss it if you drop your question in the chat. But both are open, both are available throughout the call. We're so very, very happy you're here. And yeah, here we go. Let's get this started. So here we are. Welcome to the Build a Better Government Resume Kickoff Call. This is both a start to a week-long resume review workshop, but it's also an informational session for folks who are looking to hear tips and strategies for navigating roles in government. So while some of you may be able to receive a one-on-one review session for your resume, this call is both for your resume, but it's also for your search, right? So we're looking to help you look for roles that align with your motivations and with your strengths, share insights into hiring practices, share how you might make your application stand out, language to best leverage your skills, and questions that you might want to ask to get to the meat of an organization's or a team's goals. And also just as a reminder that you are not alone. You could be passively looking for a role or diligently looking, and there's so many folks on this call who are in that same boat with you, and we want to share that community with you so you know that you are not alone, and there are folks out here that are willing and excited to help you, right? So let's level set here, right? I see you all are still introducing yourself in the chat. We want to know, considering that you all might be at different stages of your journey or search, how many government roles you have applied for over the past year. It could be none. Maybe you are interested in transitioning but haven't submitted any applications. Maybe it's 1 to 5. You are just looking for roles but haven't found the roles that fit, or looking for more time to dedicate, all the way up to 15 plus, where you are actively looking, you're staying connected with opportunities, and so on and so forth. So yeah, and if you've been asked to interview for a role, feel free to share that in the chat as well. Landing an interview can definitely be a hurdle. And while we'll be covering the interviews and that portion later, we know that folks would love to get a glimpse into that. So yes, keep the chat going. I see it. Happy you all are introducing yourselves. Keep answering, maybe leave this up for a few seconds and then we'll leave it up. Great. All right, so spoiler alert, we have some amazing folks on this call. They're so excited to share their expertise. They are team leaders, hiring experts, technology improvers, all ironically GSA alums, two ironically with the same name. That was an accident, I promise. But I'll let them tell y'all who they are and what they're all about. So let's start. Brian, you ready? You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or hello, wherever you are. Brian Whittaker, pleasure to meet you. I'm Afro Latino, girl dad times two. Got one that's three and one that's one. So we are in the trenches currently. My background's computer engineering and an MBA, one from the Rochester Institute of Technology. And I think I saw some folks from the University of Maryland in the chat as well. So go Terps. Started my career in private sector, transitioned to government, did about 8 years in the federal government across GSA, CFPB, and FDIC. And now I'm back in the private sector, but also running a nonprofit called Humans of Public Service. What do I love? New music, puzzles, and martial arts. So find me on LinkedIn if you get a chance. Happy to be here. I'll hand it off to one of two Jens. I think that's,
You
yeah,
were
Jen
right.
Tress. There you go.
Good guess.
Hey, yeah, right. You had a good chance of that being correct. Hello, everyone. I'm Jenn Tress. I currently run Verge Talent Partners, but have a lot of experience across pretty much all sectors, working in Gov. Gov has been clients. I've also worked with a lot of private sectors and nonprofits. I am really an empathetic connector. I love to connect people to opportunities. And, I know folks are going through, a lot of churn. If you're a government person, if you're looking to work in government right now and the talent market itself. I also love the outdoors, puzzling and TV, and can also vouch for the fact that Brian loves to identify new music. He shares awesome songs with me all the time. I'm going to pass to Jenn as well.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenn, and I am a design strategist at the General Services Administration. I'm located in Chicago, Illinois. GSA is the operations arm of the federal government. We manage all of our federal buildings, acquisitions, and technology. I am here today in my personal capacity, not representing the agency. And I've personally been in government for 5 years non-consecutively. I've had a lot of experience in the private sector as well. And during this time in government, I have had a lot of experience reviewing resumes and helping folks get hired across government. So I'm really excited to be here to share some tips and tricks for folks today.
Yay, thank you. Thank you all for introducing yourself. I don't have my own intro slide, so I'll be really, really quick. My name is Jai Rogers. I'm the Talent Community Manager at USDR, and I will share more about USDR. So US Digital Response is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We work alongside governments at all levels to ensure that they have the capacity to meet the public's needs. And our work is made possible by engaging experienced technologists interested in skill-based volunteering. We might have a few volunteers on the call, so hey y'all. Volunteers may join short-term projects to support and collaborate with our government partners, and it is amazing, amazing work. And the mission of that work still stands, even when there are changes that may affect the goals and practices of government. We are going to transition a little bit, and I want to reintroduce Mark Lerner, the Deputy Director of the Technologists for the Public Good. He will be offering some context and guidance according to the current state of government hiring. Oops, skipped ahead, sorry. So yeah, there's a lot to consider right now, and we want to just take a moment to acknowledge some of the uncertainty that many of us are experiencing. So go ahead, Mark.
Thank you so much for that. And hey, folks, again, Mark Lerner here with Technologists for the Public Good. Brief overview, we're a nonprofit professional association for technologists that work in and around the public sector. Technologist is very broadly defined. Anybody who's an engineer, designer, data scientist, procurement expert, policy analyst, anybody who works in modern ways and with technology. When it comes to the public good part, we're talking about public services, and a lot of that has to do with federal, state, and local level governments. When it comes to the state of government hiring right now, I think that a lot of folks are generally aware of the current hiring freeze at the federal government level. And I wanted to just spend a beat, not that long, talking about what that kind of looks like and what that means, and focus on one really key message, which is that the mission of public service and of working in technology for the public good still stands, even when changes affect how government operates and the goals that we might have immediately ahead of us. When it comes to roles with the federal government, as folks likely know, there's a current hiring freeze in place. That hiring freeze will last a total of 90 days, after which it's hard to say what the situation or what the hiring ecosystem at the federal level might be. All that said, in past administrations and in past experiences where there have been hiring freezes, we've seen roles come back again. And we've seen people that have gone into government or have stayed in government throughout this do incredible work, regardless of what administration is in place, regardless of what the cases around them might be. And I know that there's a lot of different factors to consider when it comes to taking a role with the government, particularly one that folks might have some disagreement with. Both USDR and TPG were both nonpartisan organizations. We also focus a lot on not just the federal level, state level and local level governments, as well as community-based organizations and others still have quite a lot of needs that need to be filled. And there are so many different ways to make an impact in government, and that impact is also still very possible at the federal level. For folks that do have a desire to work at the federal level, there's again this period right now where there's a hiring freeze, but coming soon that will be lifted and roles will start to become available again. So we hope that the advice that we share here in this presentation is of help, not just for folks that are looking for state and local roles, but also in the future as folks prepare to apply for federal roles as they become available again. I know that there's a lot of things to consider, but frankly, for myself, and I think for many of the others here, public service is just so near and dear to our heart. And I hope that folks continue to consider working with the federal government when that becomes possible. Now, on to the fun stuff. Our first talk is given by Jenn Tress. A quick reminder, keep the chat going. I love seeing all of the chat messages flowing through my screen. Keep using the Q&A and go ahead and be sure to ask questions and let us know what your thoughts are. But I'm going to go ahead and invite Jenn Tress to take the stage.
Thanks, Mark. Super well said. Appreciate the context there. And hello again, everyone. As y'all know, I'm Jenn Tress, and I've spent most of my career really working at the intersection of strategy, HR, and operations across various sectors and industries. And so in 2015, I joined 18F at the General Services Administration as their first talent director, later became the chief of staff at GSA's Technology Transformation Services. I've also led work at the state level at the CA, the California Office of Data and Innovation, and at New Jersey's Office of Innovation. In 2020, I founded Verge Talent Partners with my business partner, Abdul Smith, and a portion of our clients are government agencies looking to hire talent, and that's something that we help with a lot. So I say this to say I'm really coming into this session through the lens of a talent lead and someone who's worked with government HR teams, with subject matter experts in Gov, and has really keen understanding of what they look for when they're looking at your resumes. Okay, next slide. So what we're going to cover, I want to talk about the different paths to employment with US governments. There's a few. Some tips for searching different government job sites, what will make for a strong application based on who's viewing it, demonstrating desired competencies in your resume, and then questions to really ask yourself after I talk through these things before you really hit that apply button. Okay, so these different paths. There are 4 that I want to share, all of which are open to US citizens only. So in almost every circumstance, the hiring agency will be required to post the announcement on their Gov Careers or job website, and almost every position will include a probationary period, which is typically around 12 months. For the competitive service positions, these are permanent roles that are open to the public, which means anyone who is qualified is encouraged to apply. In this case, government HR is the first group to review these resumes, and they're going to rate and rank each resume so that they fall into one of 4 categories, which are typically best qualified, well qualified, qualified, and not qualified. And the best qualified list is what's sent to the hiring manager, and then managers can review those resumes and choose who they want to interview from that list. In this case, the competitive service positions, veterans preference applies. And that means depending on a veteran's status, so for example, if the veteran was disabled as part of their service, they'll be assigned different points that can move them up to that best qualified category, and then they must be interviewed. The next is the merit promotion positions. These are also permanent roles. However, they're only open to current and former employees of that particular government. So in this case, vet preference does not apply. And SMEs are the designated people who review your resumes first, not HR. Those SMEs are designated by the hiring manager, and they're going to review all those resumes and then recommend to the hiring manager who is interviewed. And in this case, the hiring manager can also be a SME. The next is direct hire positions, also permanent roles and open to anyone. So these are typically used for hard to fill roles. A lot of your cybersecurity, info security engineers fall into this, but some broader technology roles are too. So in this case, vet preference also does not apply, and HR will send the resumes directly to the hiring manager to review and determine who moves into the interview process. So it's all really the hiring manager's discretion. These are non-competitive. Candidates come to them on they're referred on a first come, first served basis. Sometimes the job announcement's open for a discrete period of time, and sometimes it's open and continuous. So it can be up for several months, and there are batches that are sent by HR to the hiring manager. And then the last one I want to talk about is term appointment positions. So these are temporary roles that are typically hired for 1 to 2 year terms and can usually be extended for another term period. They're typically used for project-based needs, so they have a shorter staffing need. And employees in this role have access to the same health, retirement leave benefits as permanent employees. Well, some of these positions have the ability to convert to a permanent role. It's not guaranteed, so it's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so how do you search for these types of roles? For the competitive permanent roles, so these apply to that competitive service and merit promotion positions, you can go to any government jobs or careers platform. And these roles are what most government jobs are. They mostly are competitive perm jobs. So you search by keyword, location, usually like agency, what's the job title, the skill set. And then for merit promotion, you might want to look for merit promotion in the case of federal government jobs on USA Jobs, or internal promotion opportunities. So those are some key search terms. For direct hire, you can go to the jobs platforms again, and you'll use a search term such as direct hire authority. So Jai, if I could have you jump out to this link and show folks. You can see here where that comes up as direct hire authority is listed as part of that when you put that in. So those types of jobs will typically come up, and that's a USA Jobs example. Thanks, Jai. Back to the slides here. That's a federal term. For state and local, it may be special appointment or emergency appointment that gives you that same view. For term appointment, those 1 to 2 year terms that can be moved to another, extended for another term, you might use term or term limited. So Jai, same thing, if you could go to this link here, this is Colorado's job site. And you can see term limited, that shows you some of these types of roles here that are available. So those are ways to use some search terms to find these different pathways. And if you go to, there's a really good job aggregator. This is a really solid one called governmentjobs.com. it aggregates a bunch of different ones. And so you can also look there to see kind of across different government job platforms what might be available. Okay. All right. So now key elements of a strong application. There are sort of 3 takeaways that I want to talk about for this. For government resumes, the more detail is the better. That might be counterintuitive, but when your resume is being reviewed by an HR specialist, they're really looking closely at the job requirements that are posted on the job announcement, and they're really looking at your resume in a really deep way. So the more, the better. You don't want to overdo it, but if your resume takes up 4 pages to share all of your experience, then 4 pages is fine. So there's a really good guide here called Preparing Your Resume Guidance from the Technology Transformation Service. I think those are going to be shared with you, but you might want to grab that and print it out so you have that available to yourself. But for thinking about those details, here's a really good formula to use. For each position, you'll want to use an action impact metric model. So for example, as a designer, you might say something like, redesigned and tested a mobile app interface and navigation system, leading to 40% reduction in user errors and 25% increase in daily active users. Those are exactly the types of things that people are looking for when you're describing your background and experience. The second takeaway is really customizing your resume and your responses to your assessment questions. So on USA Jobs, which is the federal hiring site, you can make your resume searchable, and you can also have your resume posted that you can use to apply to different ones. So you might want to have a good template up there of something that can be broadly applied. But if there is a role that has, for example, a specialized experience statement, you'll really want to align the keywords in that to your resume. And it's the same with assessment questions. Sometimes on an application, you may have self-assessment questions that say, explain how your experience and background aligns to this key requirement in the job. And you'll, take a paragraph or 2 to do that. The other piece is opting in and sharing your resume widely. So that's something you can do. Okay, next slide. Okay, what hiring teams are looking for. I just want to show that there's different competencies and proficiency levels. So you might have a competency that's in there about demonstrating experience and skills and user experience and design methods. There are different, if you're in your mid to senior level, you might fall under that your familiar or experience proficiency level. And if you are more at the executive experience level, you might fall in that advanced. So here's different ways in which you can demonstrate your experience, your proficiency level against that competency. Okay, final slide. All right, questions to ask yourself before hitting apply. Does my portfolio link showcase my strongest, most relevant work? That's what you'll want to show. Do my highlighted skills, experience, and accomplishments really align with what's in that job announcement? Folks are going to be looking for that closely. Have I quantified my impact with that action and metrics model that I mentioned? Are the methodologies that I use clearly demonstrated? Have you really highlighted your software proficiency and different tools that might be highlighted in the job announcement? Is my resume scannable? Can I look at something and really show, hey, it's clear. I, as a person who's looking at it, I can easily scan this. And then have I proofread for clarity and removed any jargon that might be confusing to, for example, an HR specialist who might not be as familiar with your work as a SME? Okay, folks, that's what I've got. I'm going to pass on to Jen now. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jen. So for today, I will be deep diving into how to decode government jobs and translate your experience and skills for the public sector. So something I hear a lot from folks looking to join government is that they can't find any roles that match their current job titles. And that's usually because the job titles you might be used to in the private sector don't usually match what they're called in government. So let's take a look at some common tech roles. So if you're in the product space, as a product manager or product owner, for example, in government, a lot of these roles are called program manager, program analyst, project manager even. And I know that there's a huge difference between program and project roles to product roles, but often in government, these are just grouped. And part of the reason for this is because product management is a fairly new discipline to government. So there's a huge opportunity for product folks to bring in this expertise. Engineering and software development roles are most of the time referred to as IT specialists. Sometimes, but rarely, I'll see computer scientist. And that's partially because engineering in government usually refers to engineering roles like chemical, mechanical, or civil engineering, and less so software engineering. Design also falls under an IT specialist role. Specifically, a lot of design roles will fall under this like systems analysis bucket. And sometimes you'll see roles that are that say like usability specialist or web designer. And there are more roles now under user experience or customer experience, but it's still just not fully common. And then you can see here research roles are also often called management analysts or program analysts, content strategy roles, consistently called like technical writer, sometimes content designer. And to be honest, I think out of all of these roles, data jobs are the most straightforward. So you'll find data scientist, data engineer, and data analyst roles pretty easily. And then the last thing I want to mention is that I often recommend folks to search broadly for roles that they're using for that they're looking for using keywords like strategist, digital, or web. And hopefully this helps you find the specific roles that you can apply to in government. Sorry. So once you've found a role, make sure that you read the job description closely. So for example, these two are IT specialist roles that closed earlier this month at the federal level. The one on the left is a application software specialty. The one on the right is in internet or inet specialty. And if you're a UX designer or a content strategist, you might be inclined to overlook these roles. But if you read closer, you can actually see that the app software specialty is actually a UX role, and the internet specialty is actually a content role. So again, sometimes in government, title doesn't match the job description. My background is as a product and UX designer, and my own title is as an IT specialist with a systems analysis specialty. The other thing about jumping into the actual resume part is just an overview about what that resume process typically looks like. I know Jen covered a little bit of this. And so, HR does an initial review. They're often not deeply familiar with those keywords. If they deem it qualified, they'll move it on to a hiring manager. Sometimes a hiring manager will be familiar with the skill set, sometimes not. And I've actually helped a lot of teams at a handful of agencies do hiring. And I've worked with a lot of hiring managers that aren't subject matter experts in their own role. So it is just really important because of this to make sure that your resume does capture your experience and can convey your qualifications for the job. And then, echoing what Jen said about qualifications, make sure to read through the job announcements. I know some of them can be very lengthy, but there usually is a section that will talk about specialized experience. And what I usually recommend folks do is really highlight those qualifications in your resume. I recommend for folks to make sure that you're showing at least 1 year of relevant experience in that qualification, and you can do so by just making sure that you have the dates for when you held those roles. And some agencies and departments will also have really specific resume requirements. And I've even seen a few that say if you included X amount of information, either detailed personal data or anything like that, you might not even be considered for the role. So just, take a look and make sure that you're reading everything clearly. One other big thing too is, figure out what the HR or hiring manager is looking for and make it easy for them to connect the dots. So this has happened to me so many times where I will look at a resume and I'll think, oh, this candidate doesn't explicitly say XYZ thing that we're looking for in terms of qualifications, but has somewhat related experience. If I'm looking at 200 resumes, don't make me want to say yes. One hiring action that I ended up doing ended up getting about 700 applicants whose resumes we needed to review. Next slide, please. So in the sea of resumes, how do you make sure that you stand out? So I'll go into these steps today. So spend time reflecting on your work, making sure that you understand what the role is looking for and tailor that experience to the role, and then specify your impact. Don't just list what you did. Next slide, please. So I know it is really hard to distill all of your experience into a resume, and very often I get resumes that are packed with everything someone has ever done. And it's totally like an awesome list of accomplishments, but it's also very overwhelming for a resume reviewer to take a look and to get a sense of what that person's skill sets are. The resume is about you, but it also isn't at the same time. Next slide, please. So I get asked a lot, and I know that there's some questions in the chat right now about, do I have a government resume? Do I use my traditional industry resume? And I will be honest, I don't have a traditional government resume. All that's to say is a good resume is a good resume. And that's because even though what you've done before matters, getting a job is really about how you tell the story. So I have one resume for myself that I add to periodically whenever I apply to roles. I copy that resume and then I edit and modify it to make sure that I'm tailoring it to the role that I'm applying for. So going back to reflecting on your work, really taking time to think about the work that you've done. So what was impressive about it? What did you do? Who did you work with? And what was the impact? Government roles really want to see, what you did. A lot of government work requires you to collaborate with others, which isn't unlike the private sector at all. They want to see who you work with. So on top of that, impact is also key. So a lot of times when I'm reviewing resumes, I'm trying to understand from that person's perspective, what was the scale of the project? Were there cost savings or maybe even service delivery improvements? And how complex was the project? You have to really navigate through a lot of regulations and policies and web of old tech and new tech and lots of different constraints in government. And so that complexity piece is really key when you're translating your experience onto your resume. And so one way to start by tailoring your experience is, this is an example job posting for the city of Boston. It's actually live now if folks are located in Boston, but really taking a look at the job description, next slide, and then highlighting the sections that are, that really you think match your skill set and then match what they're looking for. And then next slide. And so once you've really pulled out of the job announcement, thinking through what experiences do you want to highlight? So I always recommend folks to answer these two questions. What did you do? How did you do it? And then why did you do it? So this is really similar to Jenn's action impact metrics. So for example, you perform X activity to get Y outcome. And you can even flip that. You can get Y outcome by performing X activity. And so going back to the service designer position, highlighting that you designed and implemented a new customer journey is the activity piece. And then the why is to really streamline that complex workflow, which helped reduce those wait times. And impact isn't just about specifying, how many customers use your product or service, but it's also sharing things like what percentage of customers were more efficient or how much time your customers saved by using said product or service. And I know that I covered a lot today, so I just wanted to leave that with the fact that a lot of the folks that I chat with are really interested in coming into government, but they don't think they'll be qualified because they don't have that government experience. And then on top of that, we have research that has shown that women typically don't apply to a job unless they meet 100% of the job requirements. Next slide. And so all of that is to say, I'm here to encourage you to apply, even if you don't meet all of the requirements. If you're excited about the role, don't be the one that you self-select, or don't be the one to self-select yourself out of that role. And I think that's it. Best of luck. And I'll hand it over to Brian now.
Awesome presentation, Jen. These two are really tough acts to follow, so just bear with me and don't go too crazy in the comments. But anyway, this is Brian Whittaker, former Chief Innovation Officer at FDIC, also held a few leadership roles at 18F and Centers of Excellence at GSA, and even did a stint at CFPB as their Director of Design and Development. But I'm now in private sector, and I run an organization called Humans of Public Service. One of the things I guess I've heard anecdotally about the government hiring process and just how difficult it can sometimes be. Somebody messaged me this week just saying that they needed somewhat of a pick me up, and they decided to go to Humans of Public Service just to read some of the stories. So as this hiring freeze wanes on, and as you start to consider private sector, check out some of these stories, listen to what people are doing and what they've done in their career, and hopefully it's a way for you to stay motivated. But besides that, what I'm here to talk about today, I really just wanted to touch on maybe 3 key topics around transferable skills. What can you really talk about in your interview that sort of translates in a government context, even if all of your career has been in private sector? Getting oriented. How do you do some background research to assess culture and get to know the type of environment you'll be working in before you say yes? And leading with empathy. Once you're in there, like what are some tips and tricks of things you should do or maybe not do once you're on the government side of the house? So next slide. So transferable skills. I've been in a few leadership positions, maybe the last 4 or 5 years of my career. Haven't necessarily had hands-on keys, but some of the specific things that come to mind for me are these 3, right? Leading people. Have you been a team lead? Have you led a project? What did that look like? What is your leadership style? How have you led formally or informally? These are things you're going to experience in government, whether you like it or not. More often than not, you might have to lead from behind. I'd say government is in a state of learning more about the power of design, the power of product management. And I'd say development roles over the last few years have started to increase in the government context, but still there's so much to learn when it comes to, let's say, working in agile manners, or even prioritizing the developer experience. So you may have to, while you may not be a formal supervisor, you may have to, manage up about what your needs are, and maybe some additional tools that could help you get things done, or some processes that could be a bit smoother. So leading, I think, is definitely a story you should think about sharing and telling. Engaging with stakeholders. I've had a few friends that have said, I really want to come into government. I really want to change things and make a difference. And I said, I appreciate the spirit, but thinking you'll be able to do this alone, that's a serious misstep. You've really got to work with a variety of people, whether it's in business divisions or other parts of the CIO organization or OCOM organization, to really get a thing done. So telling a story about how you've worked across different teams to really deliver a product, I think, is another great story to tell that would position you well. And then last but not least, presenting ideas. How have you, one, worked with others, understood all of their priorities and requirements, and synthesized that and communicated something potentially complex in a relatively easy way to understand? So thinking about those communication skills are super important. Next slide. All right, get oriented. How can you do some research and prepare some interview questions that would really give you some good insight as to the organization you're stepping into? So technology doesn't just sit in technology, or let's say product or design doesn't just sit in one specific part of a government agency. Take a look at the job description, maybe look online and maybe find some people to figure out, okay, are other designers in the CIO shop? Are they in the Office of Communication? Maybe they're sitting in a business division. But I think getting oriented around that office will sort of help you better understand the culture. Are you wholly in like a service-based organization like OCOM that is helping everybody keep their email up, making sure everybody's word is running nicely? Or you may be in an OCOM Office of Communications division where the message is really important. Not just the service, but the message is usually key. Check your network, right? I think if you don't have immediate first connections at this agency, do you know someone that knows somebody? Could you reach out, try to make that connection to better understand what is work like there? Where are you sitting in the office? How many people are in said office? What projects are being worked on? Another thing I found in my experience, contractors are really knowledgeable, and it's their job to know as much as possible when it comes to what's going on at an agency and who's who. Maybe there's somebody that's a contractor that works at an agency and can give you the real deal about what you're coming into, who's an advocate for change, who might not be, but consider all those options before you make your move. And then how can you get some culture data? How many projects are underway at one time? These are some of the key questions that I think would be worthwhile asking, whether it's someone in your network or specifically in an interview. How long is the average project? Sort of what behaviors are championed? In my previous agency, one of the things I noticed, somebody that worked late hours, worked all weekend, all the time on weekends, were getting all the awards. And I had to sort of advocate for something different, right? I'm trying to create a nice, balanced sort of work environment where folks can try things and learn. And I don't think they're going to do their best work if they're working crazy amount of hours. So I definitely advocated to my leadership for something different. So make sure you ask that question and see what sort of behaviors are appreciated. Next slide. All right, lead with empathy. So you've gotten the job and you're in. Avoid the reruns. All right. I know there's some 90s shows in here. I'm probably showing my age a little bit, but hey, they're classics. Okay. They're classics to some people. Anyway, a story that we've seen very often in government is someone from private sector comes in and says, hey, why'd you do this way? Why'd you do it like that? PU, that stinks. Like what? That is not anything we want to see any more of. So how can you possibly avoid that rerun? Listen closely, lead with empathy, ask some great questions, seek understanding, maybe what they've tried before. This section in the middle, I already mentioned listen closely, but if you've seen Slow Horses, these folks are underdogs, unassuming sort of CIA agents over there in the UK. But gosh, do they always seem to save the day? Yeah, they do. I think they're asking the right questions. They're not always looking at things at surface value. So try to understand how these agencies got to where they are and how you can help. Last but not least, as I mentioned, your skill sets that you're bringing to the table, I think, are maturing in the government space. Build community, get to know us, get to know the people on this call, because change is hard. Sometimes you might be the only designer. Maybe there's only two of you, but there's lessons to be gained across the federal government. And I've never seen anything bad from building community. So that's my presentation for today. Excited to answer any questions that you all might have.
Yes, thank you so much to the speakers. I also want to give a quick call out. Someone in the chat gave a suggestion to read the program website for some of these initiatives, and so that would be a really, really good tip, because it gives a really high level picture to what the goals of the program and what those initiatives are, and those topics and themes are likely to come up in the interview, and you even have a chance to showcase your alignment to that mission or that goal or that work in your resume before you even get to the interview. So thank you all. Thank you to the speakers. This was amazing. We're going to be transitioning into our Q&A portion. You've been dropping some questions in the portal. I know a few of us have been trying to answer some of them as they come along, so shout out to you all. So we have collected a few. we can't get to all of them, but we're going to try and cover as many as possible. So the first question I want to ask, and any of the panelists and speakers, feel free to hop in where you're like, I want to answer this. Should the resume format for the state and local government resumes be more similar to the federal industry? I know, Jenn Noinaj, you kind of shared a little bit about that, but does anyone have any particular insights or an example of one resume doing better over another, or tips of how to best leverage a particular resume style depending on the level of government? Maybe I'll just call on someone like a strict teacher. I'll call on you, Jenn Noinaj, sorry.
Yeah, so I, yeah, I might not be like, so whenever I've done a handful of hiring actions, and like, to me, if you like federal government or like government resumes are really great, because there is a lot of detail. But if it's really difficult for the resume reviewer to see, are you are we're like, for the specialized experience or for the qualification statements, like if they aren't able to see that connection in your resume, regardless of what type of resume format you use, then that's kind of a miss. So I recommend like really making sure that you can kind of connect those dots for folks, regardless of resume format. I don't know if any of the other panelists want to add anything.
I agree with that, Jen. And I would say, to the point of being able to scan things quickly, you don't need to necessarily put at the top. I see some resumes that are like, here's my skill sets, here's my this. Just kind of jump into your work experience and make sure that your work experience that at the first like 2 to 3 at least tie very closely to what it is that job posting is asking for, because they'll want to see that it's recent experience and relevant experience. And so being able to say kind of those top pieces right at the beginning, I'm looking at this, I can see directly, yes, this person has the experience very recently that aligns to this job posting. And then, I'd say the second thing, I'm not a big style over substance person, but some reviewers can get really hung up if you have different fonts and different like text sizes and things like that, and use that as a thing to kind of dismiss, even if you have really good experience. So that stuff does matter as much. The style, the length of it, I'd say keep it to no more than 4 pages. But again, if 2 covers it, great. If you need to go to 4, great. But I wouldn't go much longer than 4, I would say.
Yeah, just plus wanting to all of that. Again, a strong resume is a strong resume, and with government style resumes, leaning more into impact, being really prescriptive with like what you have done and how you are telling that story, rather than sometimes industry resumes lean more succinct and like perfect picture, perfect candidate versus like getting more into the nitty gritty. So thank you for those insights. Another question is advice for networking in the government space. Brian, I would love to hear from you about this. Networking king, take it away.
Well, I would say, doing what you're doing right now, I think is the first major step. I saw so many people dropping their links, LinkedIn, in the chat, and gosh, like if it weren't for LinkedIn, I don't know where I'd be in my career. Honestly, I've had a lot of opportunities to support others. I think, making time to just chat with a few folks about what government's like, and where opportunities might be, and things that they could consider, whether it's in private sector or in government that are mission driven. People are generous with their time. I think folks really like to offer their expertise and be helpful where they can, especially within a government or mission sort of focused context. So connecting with others on LinkedIn, being brave enough for the cold outreach, and I'd say continuing to join communities like these and attend events, I think are the best tips and tricks I could potentially offer.
Yeah, and shameless plug for USDR and TPG. We are very intentional about hosting events and opportunities for folks to connect. with each other. And so we want you all to seize these opportunities and take these connections beyond. I was able to connect with US Digital Response through other ecosystem organizations. So this is definitely, if you have the knowledge, we share it, and everyone is so willing to be helpful and just being diligent about staying in these spaces. Another question is, how vital are portfolios in the federal government, federal hiring process? Jenn Noinaj, I would love to hear, like, from your experience reviewing resumes, what type of considerations you've taken into portfolios or other collateral that people share along with their resume.
Yeah, and this is going to be very dependent job by job. So I have hired a ton of designers into government, and I don't think that a design portfolio should be required, to be honest. I think that it puts a lot of burden on designers to have to put that together. And so there are a handful of design roles that don't require a portfolio. And when I don't require a portfolio, I'm not even able to, if I don't require it, you're not supposed to look at it. Because you have to treat all candidates fairly, right? So if it's not required, don't even worry about it. Just focus on your resume, making sure that your resume is great. If it is required, I often tell folks to use it as an opportunity to really showcase your process and then again, that impact. So I think that there was another question in the Q&A about metrics, for example. The things that I typically look for when I'm looking at like UX or design portfolios are, the scale, again, the scale, right? So like how many, for X project, how many people did you talk to? How many people did you interview? How many, like, what was your user research process look like? And then you can kind of extrapolate that to, okay, based on you conducting this research or whatever it may be, what was the outcome of that? Like, did it lead you to X finding or whatnot? So again, still focusing on the details of the process and the metrics when it comes to portfolios.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think this will probably be the last question, but there were a few like-minded questions, I would say, around quantifying your impact. Whoever wants to take this is open. But the specific question is, how much of a disadvantage is it if you don't have the hard numbers for quantifying your impact? As a UX researcher who has worked on large teams, you might not always have access to those metrics. Maybe you're on a team where you work on a particular part, but you want to share the story from start to finish. How would you best highlight those experiences when you have very few or limited quantitative outcomes that you can list? Go ahead, Jenn Tress. Go ahead.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think if you do have metrics, let's come from that place first, but it's a team-wide thing, you can just say, I contributed to, in my role as a designer, et cetera, researcher, I contributed to this team's delivery of this thing that, made this impact. And during an interview or et cetera, they might ask you, describe your role in this and how you specifically contributed, but for a resume perspective, you can put that. If you don't have hard numbers that are quantifiable, then you may want to see if you can, find those, just by checking on things. But if you can't, you can certainly say things like improved speed, and led to more users, significantly more users, things like that, that really relay the impact that you had absent any hard numbers.
Any other framing or context from any closing thoughts from the speakers? Anything else? Awesome. Well, I want to take the time to thank you all again, and thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to U.S. Digital Response and Technologists for the Public Good, our co-host for this workshop. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you learned a lot. As my grandmother used to say, I hope you learned you something today. So I, I hope you learned you something. I hope that you have actionable and tangible takeaways. And for those of you who are participating in the one-on-one resume review sessions later this week, we hope that you feel even more empowered and prepared to submit a thorough and successful application. Here is a link tree that we have available to you all. It has the resources and links that we've shared throughout this presentation. We will be sharing this recording and this presentation in full at a later date. But at this link, you will have access to the links that we've shared, as well as ways to connect with our speakers, ways to stay engaged with USDR and TPG, ways to volunteer, get subscribed to newsletters, all that good stuff. Thank you so much. Again, it's been our joy. Again, my name is Jai Rogers, and yeah, good luck. May the odds be in your favor. Happy job hunting. If you have any questions, keep dropping them in. Feel free to use these last few minutes to say your final goodbyes. Thank you again to our speakers. We made it in time. We saved some time. Any other thoughts from y'all as we're saying goodbye, y'all?
You
Hey,
got
y'all.
this. You got
think
this,
that was-
folks.
You got it. All right. So thank you all. Again, we'll be wrapping this up. Clap, clap all around. Ending. I'm going to stop sharing now. Again, thank you so much to our speakers. And have a good day, y'all. Logging off. Bye. Bye, everyone.